Hey listeners, we all know how important it is to get dedicated face time with retail buyers. And now when you upgrade to a RangeMeet Pro subscription, you get 3 in-person buyer meetings at an ECRM session. That's right, 3 20-minute private meetings with buyers in your category. Tell them your story, sample your products, and have a distraction-free conversation. And a pro tip, our Startup CPG community discount is the best deal around on RangeMeet. You can get RangeMeet Pro with the 3 meetings for $11.99. That's more than half off the regular annual rate. RangeMeet Pro subscribers also get unlimited product listings, a dedicated customer success manager, VIP access to limited time campaigns, exclusive ongoing submission opportunities, and insights into which retailers are checking out your brand and products. To learn more, visit rangeme.com/startupcpg.
My love language is feeding people, so this is the perfect thing for me and probably why I'm partially going into self-manufacturing to start. Yeah, I would say it took almost 2 years to actually think of the right product. You know, it was one of those ideas in the back of my head, okay, if I ever thought of the right product, then maybe I'll do it. So even though I love high-end culinary foods, I'm also a sucker for ready-to-go, grab-and-go food that I feel like is made in a really high-end intentional way. And I think that what we see from the data is that so many other people do. It's such a trend. And I said, I have to do it. I will go to my deathbed regretting not doing something that literally doesn't exist in the market. How often do you get to invent something? It's not another, and this is no diss to anyone else who's doing another sports drink or cracker or chocolate, but this really is something that doesn't exist, and I'm really excited to be the one bringing it to market. I felt like if I'm not going to, who else is? And if someone else is, I'll be pretty bummed it wasn't me.
Hi everyone, Grace here, and welcome back to the Startup CPG podcast. Today, I am so excited to introduce Sarah Nathan's brand NOOISH, a modern Jewish comfort food brand that is launching this fall. Sarah has 10 years of experience in the CPG industry, but this is her first foray into founding her own brand and all of the many challenges that come with that. We talk about everything from nailing the texture of her matzo ball soup to building community in the CPG space. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and as always, let me know what you think. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Startup CPG podcast. This is Grace here with another founder feature, actually a first feature of this brand new brand, NOOISH, founded by Sarah Nathan, who I'll be talking to today. They are launching at the end of the summer or early fall, and they are bringing a new-ish take, if you will, on modern Jewish comfort food. So, Sarah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners and your new brand.
Thank you so much, Grace. Yeah, exactly like you said. We are a newish take on modern Jewish food, comfort food, and we are doing new spins on old classics. So our first product is instant matzo ball soup. It's like cup of noodle, but matzo ball soup. You add water, 2 minutes in the microwave, and you have a really delicious, piping hot, warm, high-end bowl of matzo ball soup.
Yum. That sounds delicious, and I want some right now. So, Sarah, I'd love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about why you decided to start NOOISH now today, and also a little bit about where you're coming from as you start this brand, a little bit about your background and what brought you to the CPG industry, and then what brought you to create NOOISH itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 prongs to that story, 2 sides of kind of who I am that make this the perfect fit for me specifically. So from a CPG standpoint, I joined the industry almost a decade ago. I was the first employee at Regrain. They made snacks out of the grain from brewing beer. They were upcycling. But what really happened was that I fell in love with the industry. I would go to all these networking events, meet amazing people. And I'd get their cards and I'd be, this was before Startup CPG and Slack and before all of that. And I really said, how am I going to connect with this person, am I going to say, oh, I have your card a year later? Remember we were talking about, how to get into Target in front of that Chobani booth. And so it's like, how can we build relationships and some trust and really help each other? So I made a Google group for people to be able to give each other advice. And it was specifically for brands, founders, employees at brands. So there wasn't any service providers, investors, media, buyers, etc. And that way everyone really felt like they could be so open and honest with each other. And that really is what propelled me to getting the job at Chobani Incubator, which, was such an amazing experience. I was running all the programming at the incubator. If you're not familiar with the Chobani Incubator, unfortunately is not running anymore. But it would use all of Chobani's resources to help brands that match their DNNA, delicious, nutritious, natural, and accessible or affordable. So we would help brands through their growth stage with marketing, sales, operations, health safety, food safety, legal, you name it. And that's really what gave me such an eye into all these different categories, all these different brands, all these different founders, how hard it is to be a founder. I'm like, I don't think I ever wanted to do this. Honestly, what I told myself, which I'm sure is, the story of a lot of would-be founders. But I really loved helping and mentoring. And, unfortunately, during the pandemic, the program was eliminated. My job was eliminated. But I really wanted to learn how to, I have all these qualitative skills. I really love helping these brands. I feel like I'm, choosing the right brands. How can I do that in a more quantitative way? And so becoming a buyer, category manager at National Co-op Grocers really helped me get that other side of the business, really help understand how do buyers do planograms, how do they think about category. It's a big thing at Chobani is always, let's talk about category versus brand. And I think more brands need to do that. So that really gave me that experience. And then I realized I really loved being back in that startup world and helping founders. At this point, I still was like, I don't think there's anything new out in the market for me to create. I'm not going to be a founder myself, but let me be the right-hand person to someone who maybe is coming into this industry brand new, who is a solo founder, but could really, maybe a co-founder isn't appropriate for them right now, but they really still need that help and that navigation, that kind of call myself a CPG Sherpa, being able to guide them through all of those things that they don't know and the questions that they don't know how to ask. So that was really fulfilling. But the other side of the coin that a lot of people don't know, I'm told most, pretty recently, is that I've also been very active in the Jewish culinary world. At the very beginning of the pandemic, I was one of the producers on the Great Big Jewish Food Fest. It was an amazing 10-day virtual festival at the very, very beginning of the pandemic, May 2020. We all said our friends are struggling with their restaurants in New York. How can we help them? We had 25,000 people tune in. We raised $250,000. But what was so special about it was that the programming was so diverse, and that's normally not what you see in a lot of Jewish programming. A lot of people aren't familiar, but 80% of Jews in the U.S. are Ashkenazi. They're from Eastern European descent. But there's really 15 million Jews and 15 million ways to be Jewish. And here we had programming for Black Jews and Latinx and LGBT and different generations. And, so many people wrote into us and said, wow, I never really felt so connected to my culture before. How can I really continue to do this? I really want to, this programming is making me excited about who I am in a way that I normally don't connect with. Unfortunately, the next day, George Floyd was murdered. Everyone went from sourdoughing to back out on the street. And I really said, wow, this programming was such a time and place. It can never be replicated. But it showed me how much that feeling was important and how can that be replicated. And at the same time, we had all of these brands, whether it's Siete, Fly by Jing, Dozen Cousins, Maya Kamal, Amsam, really raising and elevating their own culture's food. And so I said, why is there not that for Jewish food? So that's kind of where I came to that. I am also, very involved in other places in the Jewish community. I'm the culinary coordinator at a fun Jewish food retreat out in Atlanta every year, where we bring in all the top Jewish chefs like Adina Sussman and Michael Switty. And yeah, that's kind of how I came to this. I can go into afterwards kind of like what made matzo ball soup the right choice for the start.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like you are literally perfectly primed to create this product, both from a personal level, but then also given your industry experience, you probably have such an in-depth understanding of what it takes. And it's funny because I often make that joke of somebody who interviews a lot of founders. I'm like, I would never start a brand now that I know how hard it is. But at the same time, never say never. And, it's a funny thing, though, that you kind of say, and then everyone's like, one day you find yourself at the CEO of a brand and you're like, how did I get here? But I love that and really exciting. And one thing just on a personal level, in terms of like Jewish culinary cooking is I have worked with Jo Nathan on a few of her Jewish cookbooks, which has been really fun. My life pre-writing and this side of things was more on the culinary side. And I helped her develop some of those recipes. So I'm sure she'll be very excited to hear about your brand. For people who don't know Jo Nathan, she's like the matriarch of Jewish cooking in America in a lot of ways. But yeah, very exciting to hear.
Oh yeah, Jo Nathan, I saw her last month. I gave her a sample. I am eagerly waiting to hear what she thinks, but she seems super excited to hear about what was going on with the brand and to try it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she'll be thrilled. So yeah, then thinking about, you had this idea, you had this question, can we bring a modern Jewish food brand to the forefront? What were your then next first few steps? Because I think that is a question that so many new founders have, is just, how do I start? What's my first step? So what were some of those first steps you took when you were like, okay, I'm going to do this now?
Yeah, I would say it took almost 2 years to actually think of the right product. It was one of those ideas in the back of my head. Okay, if I ever thought of the right product, then maybe I'll do it. So it took about 2 years to really I would just call up another friend who's also helped start the festival, and we'd noodle every couple months and think about it. And then one day we were talking, and being a buyer, having seen so many brands, having seen what works and what doesn't, what's difficult and what's not, I wanted to release any of those barriers and have the best chance of having a really mass market product that could cut through beyond the kosher aisle. And so for me, it was a long list of, okay, can't be a holiday item, can't be perishable. I was the frozen buyer. I know how difficult that is. Has to be something that's Americana, that most people you talk to, whether they're Jewish or not, are going to have already heard of it, know about, maybe have tried. Something that had a long shelf life. I said shelf stable, lightweight, primed for omni-channel. And that's really where I clicked. I said, what if I could make matzo ball soup into cup of noodles? I eat, instant ramen multiple times a week. I'm an instant connoisseur, whether it is Lotus Foods or Imi or Momofuku. I have them all in my house right now. I cycle through them. So even though I love high-end culinary foods, I'm also a sucker for ready-to-go, grab-and-go food that I feel like is made in a really high-end, intentional way. And I think that what we see from the data is that so many other people do. It's such a trend. The grab-and-go is such a trend. Global flavors are such a trend. Elevated food is such a trend. So I decided, hey, let's see if this, that's a great idea. But at the same time, I had just gotten a job offered to be a fractional general manager for a brand, and at the same time, even though I felt like, oh, I could do this, I've seen so many brands do it, I still had pieced together so many pieces. I had never really been an operator at that point. So getting the opportunity to be an operator really helped me, and took the imposter syndrome away. I was like, okay, actually, you can do this. You were very primed to do this based on your past and experience. And that's really what made me say, like, okay, let's dive in. Once that opportunity ended, then I was like, this idea kept noodling at me, pardon any pun. I really couldn't stop thinking about it. And I said, I have to do it. I will go to my deathbed regretting not doing something that literally doesn't exist in the market. How often do you get to invent something? It's not another, and this is no diss to anyone else who's doing another sports drink or cracker or chocolate, but this really is something that doesn't exist. And I'm really excited to be the one bringing it to market. I felt like if I'm not going to, who else is? And if someone else is, I'll be pretty bummed it wasn't me.
Totally. That's such a good reminder, though, to founders who might be listening, is if somebody else doesn't do it, or if you don't do it, somebody else will a lot of the time. And will you be kicking yourself because you didn't? So once you decided, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to create this instant cup of noodles, matzo ball soup. How did you then get connected to, how did you develop the recipe for it? How did you figure out some of those more nitty gritty things of starting a brand that are less fun than the, ideation and the imagination that comes, but, ingredients and just developing the recipe? How did you set about doing that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Recipe development is not my background, but I am lucky enough to have been in this industry, met so many fabulous people who that is their expertise. I didn't really have the money to be able to develop this myself, or to develop it through someone else. So I really just used my resources as best I could. Thought about all of these different methods that might work, and then I would ask different friends who are recipe developers, like, do you think this would work? What do you think about that? And then I was really lucky to just barter my way through. I bartered for advice. I bartered for use of freeze dryers. And so that really enabled me to be able to, without spending, I spent ingredient dollars and that was it, to be able to actually develop this myself to a place that I was pretty happy with. That was for the balls, for the broth. Also very lucky to work with my friend Jonathan Drexel, Jonathan Deutsch out of Drexel. And he helped me develop a really awesome, clean, vegan broth that I'm really excited about. And they've worked with some really cool companies to help develop things, both with Egg Board and elsewhere. And so I am working with them to dial all those little things. I'm going to be self-manufacturing because this is something that does not exist. Finding a co-man to do this process currently is a little bit difficult. Once I get to scale, there's definitely that possibility. So yeah, they're going to help me figure out my efficiencies. I'm moving into my production facility next month. And then, I'm going to start making lots and lots of matzo balls. Be swimming in matzo balls.
We'll be right back. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to announce that Startup CPG finally has an official Amazon agency partner. I know a lot of you are looking to Amazon as a great growth channel for this year and beyond, and Daybreak is the best agency that I've come across that will work with emerging brands. They have a really affordable retainer structure. It's a lot less than you'll find with other agencies that might charge you upwards of $5,000 a month, which is crazy. Based on recommendations from this community, I actually worked with Leon for my own brand and had an amazing experience. The sales grew very quickly. We started ranking really high on organic search results and really just capturing search terms in the category. I think he is an amazing fit for brands in this community, and I highly recommend reaching out to him for a chat.
Right.
You can reach out to him at Leon.
You will get very intimate with matzo balls, but it's great. And I love that you brought up the different resources you've been able to pull from, because I think that's also something that we don't necessarily always talk about enough, is like, how do you have the resources to even start a CPG brand, which can be so cash and resource intensive. And I think it's a really good reminder to use the resources you have and that are out there. And whether that's, like you said, bartering for skills, or, finding that the egg board like helps startups, which I had never heard of. I think it's really useful for founders to be reminded of that. But thinking of those resources as you're looking towards, moving into this facility, launching this brand in a more official way, or I guess not even in a more official way, just in an official way. But how are you managing that balance, right, of launching a brand while also saying, I need to make sure I continue to have resources and that we're doing this in a way that we can eventually scale and that we can not just launch this brand and then close a month later. So how are you balancing those resources?
As best I can. I think that I'm trying to take, what we in the industry would say an omni-channel approach to my funding sources and not rely on one place. When you are starting, it is much, and you haven't launched, it is much more difficult to get money than when you're out there and people can see the proof of your sales. I have been raising a family and friends round. It feels very Jewish to me to raise in community. So I've had, very small checks, but from, friends and family. I'm talking to some more potential angel investors. I've also had just strangers who really felt like, especially after October 7th, the mission, they saw my background and the business opportunity, but the mission was also something that really struck them. Like I said, I really want to show 15 million Jews, 15 million ways to be Jewish. This is a way to really bring an exciting, inclusive brand out into the world. I see OMSOM as kind of like a North Star in what they're doing with their product and marketing. They have this really fun, exciting, bright brand that brings you in. But then if you join their community and their social media and everything, they're like, we're loud and proud. We're not submissive. Like, let's break down myths and stereotypes and history and, teach, but in a fun, not preachy way. And, that's what I think I want to do for Jewish culture. When I go out and meet people who are unfamiliar with Jewish culture, or with Judaism, which is a culture, nationality, and ethnicity, and a religion, and each person kind of picks and chooses as they wish, what parts of themselves they want to really experience in that multitude of options. And so when I tell people, hey, I'm an atheist, but I'm, Judaism is very strong in my identity. Like, so many people are so interested in what that means, amazed by what that means, like want to learn more and know more. And that really opens up conversations. Right now, it's obviously a very difficult time to have some of these conversations. And, but I think the current rate of anti-Semitism, which, was already at an all-time high before October 7th, is, I think, having a brand like this is more important than ever before. And so I'm not shying away from, what the landscape looks like. But I lost my train of thought.
That's totally fine. I think what you're saying is so important and meaningful. And I love that idea of not shying away from who this brand is and who you are just because of, political conversations that might be more challenging. Is like you still get to show up as your full self, and NOOISH still gets to show up, in its entirety.
So we were talking about funding as I got sidetracked about my brand. So like I said, people are really interested in funding based on the whole package of what I have to offer, and what the brand has to offer. But I have a lot of friends who want to support, but don't have the money to fully, put into a round. And so I'm doing like a Kickstarter without the Kickstarter platform on my website on nooish.co. And that's really like a way to support, but also get really fun goodies throughout the year that honestly add up to more than what I'm asking for. And you get 4 gifts, gift boxes. So one for Rosh Hashanah, which is in usually September, but October this year, which is actually nice for get to push my launch out a little bit. Hanukkah, which is in December, Purim, where you actually traditionally give gifts of food in March, and then Passover, where most people are familiar with eating matzo balls in April. And along with other Jewish-owned products, I really want to lift up the whole community. There's so many fun, amazing, high-end other Jewish-owned products, whether they're, based in Jewish culinary tradition or just Jewish-owned. And then some really fun merch and lifetime discounts. So that's actually gotten me some, money that's really helped me, buy my first freeze dryer. And I've in Chicago, been a small amount, but I'm lucky here that they have some really cool low interest loan programs, especially for women and diverse businesses. So I'm piecing it all together. Lucky I do have a tiny bit of savings, rather not go through all of it. But, I think that if you're not in, if you don't have the same investment in your business that you're asking other people to do, then I don't think it's fair. So I'm very scrappy, but I'm excited to be finally using the money to grow in the right way, in a way that is, very important right now, very sustainable, high margin product, and a saleable go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you're sort of pulling on your community that you do have while also creating more community through getting the word out about this product and through saying, be a part of this early stage. And something else I wanted to talk to you about is some of this community building that you've done, obviously, as you were doing during the pandemic. And then more recently, I know that you've been hosting these CPG Shabbats. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how that sort of community building plays a part of not only your life, but also this brand that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel Sharf and I both, different cohorts, different years, but we went on the same program called Reality Israel Taste. It's an amazing program they have it for different industries. This one is obviously for the food industry, people all over the industry, whether it's CPG, restaurant owners, photographers, PR, you name it, get to go to Israel and really see the whole landscape, see what's going on. It's usually about half Jewish, half not Jewish. A lot of times people who maybe aren't as connected, and shows the whole landscape. We meet with people in the West Bank, we meet with people in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, Druze in the South, and really get to see the whole landscape. But it also really made me see so many people who, again, that same thing where they're not used to, they don't know too much about Jewish culture, Jewish history, really seeing their eyes open and seeing what having access to learning about someone else's culture, how their minds can shift. And so what's great about this programming is that they really encourage the alumni to come back and then continue to build their community outside of this bubble. And so Daniel and I both said to each other, what if we hosted a Shabbat at Expo West? And so, we kind of had the spark of an idea back in October. We made it happen. We had 145 people. We rented out, we bought out a whole restaurant, and, everyone, it was so special. So many people who had been going to Expo for 2 decades, 3 decades had said, this is the best event I've ever been to at Expo. We really, Tal from, Tal's Mediterranean Foods, formerly Fun Sesame. She really led the crowd both in prayer as well as in intention, and being able to set the mood for the night. So many people said, it was Friday night, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I just want to go back to my hotel. But at the end of the night, I felt so rejuvenated. And we had people who were not Jewish come and said, I learned so much about how welcoming and warm Jewish culture is that I really didn't know about before. So really just, again, there's no proselytizing in Judaism. That's actually a big no-no for us. I think it's really people to people, seeing people's human nature and just trying to show like who we are and what the community looks like and bringing in more opportunities for Jewish joy. We did another one and another one with Hannah Robbins in Chicago for National Restaurant Association. Planning on doing another one in Chicago, June 28th. I think this interview might come out after that, but please look out for many more that are going to happen throughout the country. We just found out that New Hope, Now Expo ends Friday afternoon. So, I still want to make it happen, but we'll have to see what that looks like, if people are going to be going home before then, or if we can, really foster an opportunity to make something happen.
We'll be right back. Hello, everybody. Have you ever reached out to a traditional recruiting agency to try to fill a role and then been shocked when you found out that they charge up to 30% of a first-year salary? That could be $50,000 or way more. That's so unaffordable for an early brand. But there's great news. I am thrilled to announce that Startup CPG now has an official recruiting partner that I think is the best fit for emerging brands. They are called Creative Alignments. They're a top-tier recruiter, and the best thing is that they work on an hourly model. It's called time-based recruiting. Often, you could fill a position with them for just 10 to 12% of a first-year salary, and if you work with them on multiple roles, you could save even more. They've worked with RX Bar, Cauli Power, Kodiak Cakes, Olipop, and so many other brands, and they are extremely well regarded within our Startup CPG Slack community. So if you're considering hiring, I really recommend reaching out to them for a free consultation. You can visit their website at creativealignments.com or email them directly. Our contact is frank.milianti, that's MILIANTI at creativealignments.com. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, I love that. And I love just the idea, too, of bringing something more personal and just an opportunity to come together as a community outside of some of the overwhelming stress that Expo can bring. It's definitely a nice way to sort of put an end to the week. So sort of returning now to NOOISH as you are preparing for launch, what are some of your strategies to bring it to your community that you have already cultivated, and then, future community that you hope to bring into NOOISH?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of people sense matzo ball soup as a love language. It is warmingly referred to as Jewish penicillin. It's one of those things that really can heal whatever you're feeling. And so many people in this world today are, not feeling their best. And to be able to have that warm hug, especially from a loved one, is so important. And people send matzo ball soup through spoonfulofcomfort.com or goldbelly.com, through Zabar's or Zingerman's or, all these delis. And it's $150 to send 2 quarts of frozen soup. But people do it all the time, or they've looked into doing it and just said, I can't afford that, but I really want to send something to my friend. So I'm able to send a 6-pack, including shipping, for 1/3 of the cost. They can put it in their pantry. They can eat one now. They can put it in their pantry for when they're feeling like it later. Long shelf life, probably, close to 2 years at least, if not more. So, really being able to say, send that love language. And then I really want to hit other low-hanging fruit. I have the opportunity to work with Hillels across the country. If people aren't familiar, Hillel is the Jewish student group across the country. There's 800 Hillels in the country. And they already have soup programs. They have the opportunity for parents to send soup, whether it's they're going through finals or they're not feeling well or it's a holiday and they just can't get home. Their parents can send it to them. And if you talk to the, directors of these Hillels, they're like, we hate having to, source kosher perishable soup and send it. And we think it might, they're not eating it. It might go bad. So they're like, you're really solving a problem for us. So I'm finding all of these really interesting channels that most CPG products don't really have access to, that I do, that are a really great start. I think there's so much omni-channel opportunity before having to go into, the retailers where you are spending a lot on shelf space and promotions and all that. So I'm really excited to hit up, my gym has a really amazing grab and go bodega. all the different opportunities where people I hear all the time say, I love matzo ball soup. I hate making it, or I don't know how to make it. And I would eat it more often if it was more easy and accessible.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And having a shelf-stable product really does open up a lot of opportunities for you in terms of just ease of getting it places. Because yeah, I've definitely interviewed some frozen brands or even refrigerated brands, and they're always talking about the challenges that come with that. So, shelf-stable definitely makes things a little bit easier. But sort of a few more questions as we get towards our end. One being, if you were to see NOOISH a year from now, where do you sort of hope to be then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really hope to build the community and the brand. Like I said, that low-hanging fruit with the people who, are looking for a deeper connection or more representation of themselves, who maybe don't feel like the Manischewitz kosher aisle really represents them, but they feel like here's something exciting that I can now hold on to. And then those who are like, I've gone to the deli, I've had a best friend who's Jewish, or I've tried it somewhere else and wants to try it. And then I really hope to, within the next year, start getting, going inch wide, mile deep, getting into some of the more local chains here. I'm in Chicago. I think going direct to consumer, I'm really going to get a bird's eye view on where this product is selling best and who it's selling best to. I've had everyone from my friends' toddlers and babies to my friends, to my parents and my grandparents and every age group just tell me how they are the perfect audience for this. So I think it's going to be, I have theories, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see who grasps onto it and where we can go from here. But it seems like it's one of those universally beloved Americana comfort foods. I was living in Minnesota before Chicago, and I had a plumber come into my house, and he was like, "What's that jar of balls on your counter?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's matzo balls." And he's like, "My wife and I love matzo ball soup." And this guy is like Minnesota, blue collar, born and bred. Like, and I'm like, "How do you know matzo ball soup?" And he's like, "My wife makes it." I goes, "Your wife Jewish?" "No, we just love it." And then that's really what made me, I think if I never lived in the Midwest, I'm from the coast, I would have just assumed like, oh, it's such a coastal thing. Nobody, but in the Midwest, it's winter, 7 months out of the year. Every culture has a soup and dumpling. People love that comfort that it provides. And someone the other day told me that they're like, I would compare it more like to minestrone. You wouldn't go and order minestrone and think it's an Italian soup. You're just ordering a minestrone soup. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I think matzo ball soup really is these days. When you go to the deli, when you go to even regular restaurants that just want to provide that classic comfort.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I love to order matzo ball soup from like a diner, just like casual diner anywhere in Philly, in New York. I feel like there's always matzo ball soup on the menu, and it's always delicious. But my last question is thinking about a founder who might be listening to this, who hasn't started their brand yet and is looking for some advice about how to begin. Given your experience, both as somebody in the industry and then now as a founder yourself, what piece of advice would you give to a founder who's looking to start their own brand? And I know that's a big question.
No, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest pieces of advice I would say is really do your market research ahead of time. I do have a lot of people come to me asking for advice, having ideas, either having the idea or having already started. And I'll say to them, they'll say, I'm the only one doing this. And having so much experience I can probably name every brand off the top of my head that exists right now, or maybe not every, 75%. I'll say, well, what about this, and I'll name, 5 to 10 different brands and so I think really understanding your market, knowing what else is out there, knowing what problem you're solving, if it's a problem you're solving for yourself or your kid, is it something that a mass amount of people have this problem? It's not. And what are your goals? You don't have to be that big national brand that goes and raises money and sells. You can really say, hey, I really do want to share this love. My love language is feeding people. So this is the perfect thing for me, and probably why I'm partially going into self-manufacturing to start. And I wouldn't take that away from anybody, but does a farmer's market make sense? Does, a family business make sense? What is you never know how something is going to blow up. Angie's Boom Chicka Pop was a popcorn, California at the farmer's market. And someone can always discover you and you can find a bigger market or timing. But I would say, start small. It's not possible for anyone and everything. For me, I am kosher, which means I have to have my own facility. I can't go into a shared kitchen for $20 an hour. I have to sign a year lease. I have to, build out my whole facility. But I think but I've tested out the market for a year and a half. I've been R&Ding in my own house and handing out samples to everybody and their mother, and talking to people about, the feedback, not only on the taste of the product, but on the use case, and the want for it. And I'd say don't jump into it. Really think about it. Think about what it is, what problem you're solving, and what does it look like to be a founder, knowing that once you do it, you can't stop until you stop. And you also be ready for the roller coaster.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's great advice and really important. And there was actually a buyer at Expo West from Earth Fair, and I was asking him, what's your advice to emerging brands? Or I was like, what are you looking for these days? He's like, no more energy drinks or protein bars. And I was like, no shade to any of those types of products, but the market is so saturated there. So knowing what the market looks like for you and where you want to enter, I think is so important. But this was so much fun to talk to you, Sarah, and learn more about NOOISH. I'm so excited for everyone in the Startup CPG community to check you guys out and maybe donate or whatever they feel, or reach out to you on Slack if they just want to connect. But if they do want to connect with you and learn more about NOOISH, what's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I'd say follow NOOISH Foods on Instagram. Not really posting on TikTok yet. Got to still figure out how to work the TikToks. But I do have an account there as well. So that will be a big place where we will be popping up. And nooish.co, and, hit me up on LinkedIn if I can. I really believe that I've gotten this far because I've been fully pay it forward for this, 8-10 years. And I want to, my time feels more limited, but I am never one to say no to anyone who asks for help. So, I've done other podcasts where a couple years later, someone will listen to it and reach out to me and say, I just listened to this podcast. Can you give me advice? And so I'm always happy to do that. And I also will say, this is the last thing that I will say, because I am now reaching out to people who are quite a lot busier than me, and I'm getting a lot of sorry, I'm busy. And I hope to never get that way. But when I do get on calls with people and they're asking me for advice, a lot of times they're super interested in what I'm doing. And they're like, oh, I know somebody who works here. Can I introduce you to them? They're perfect to help you with your brand. And so I always say, you never know what's going to happen, who you're going to meet, who you're going to connect with. So you should talk to as many people as possible and get the word out. Hamdi Ulkaya from Chobani, when he had his first booth right next to the bathroom at Expo West, said, I never looked at a badge. I never looked at, were they a buyer? Were they a consumer? Were they an investor? I just talked to them as if they were a customer. And I think that that's advice that has really taken me this far today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. And what a good note to end on. So everybody reach out to Sarah, flood her inbox, flood her LinkedIn. She'll regret ever coming on this podcast, but no, it'll be great. And yeah, it was so much fun to learn more about NOOISH and everything you're doing, Sarah. And I can't wait for you guys to officially launch, coming end of summer, early fall. So everyone keep your eyes out. And yeah, thanks again. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, it would help us out so much if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Grace Kennedy, the editor for Startup CPG, so feel free to add me on LinkedIn or reach out to me on Slack. I'm always on the hunt for new and exciting brands to feature. And if you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And finally, as a reminder for anyone listening, if you haven't already, we would love for you to join our community on Slack, and you can sign up via our website, startupcpg.com.